Hi everybody, and welcome back. Let's talk about the drummer track in Logic Pro. Once a drummer track is loaded, you can see the music genres and drummer types to work with your projects, and I'll show you that here shortly. Each drummer has different sounding drum kits and as many as 8 different preset patterns. When we open it up, the drummer user interface provides controls that can create varying drum patterns, and this allows us to change the controls of the drummer for each region to create different sections for our music. Double-click on a region in the Arrange page to view the drummer control. On the left side of the drummer user interface, a large XY pad allows us to alter what the drummer is playing at any given time, from soft and simple to loud and complex. On the right, options for changing drum cymbals, percussion, all in the kit are included in the rhythms, as well as swing rate and drum fills. On the bottom right, hitting the Details button under the swing control will reveal more information about the technique and how each piece in the kit is played. And that's this here. So that's your XY matrix, and I'll call this up here shortly for you and demonstrate exactly what we've got. This potentially, if you have this checked in, you'd have access to certain percussion, of course. If you unhighlight it, it's going to be muted. If you highlight it, it's going to be playing through. Your fills, your swing rate, and then that's the details aspect here. Continuing on, the adaptive audio regions that are created on the Arrange page for drummer tracks can actually be converted into MIDI, and I find that to be very, very powerful within the drummer track, and I'll show you that here shortly as well. This allows us to have full control over our drums, copying individual parts or whole sections, or on other tracks and instruments, and the ability to precisely edit every single hit in the pattern. So let's create a track. So in this particular case, let's open up a new drummer. So I'm going to do it here very quickly. I've got these notes in Canvas that you could see it if anything went too fast, or let's just say if I went through it and you didn't get to see them as I'm scrolling through. Feel free to go to Canvas and see everything that's there, of course, as always. I'm opening up a track here, and I'm going to open a drummer track, as you can see as it's highlighted. It gives me access to the genre. Now, in this case, songwriter, alternative, rock. I'm just going to pick rock just for fun. And let's just hit create. As you can see here, this is our drummer track region. And that drummer track region, as you can see, is a little bit longer than the sequence that we created. This is the same sequence that you've seen in the other videos. Of course, I'll just play this through if you remember. And that's the chord change that we created for our last project that you guys all turned in and did great on, by the way. So going to our drummer track now, as you can see here, this is a very different way of looking at our programming, isn't it? On top of that, as you can see on the bottom, this is what we were talking about in the notes, is I've got access to that XY matrix. And so if I wanted to take and make this louder and more complex, I could just shift this around. Or if I wanted it to be softer, I could just move this down. Let's listen to what it sounds like. So let's say we want that a little more hardcore. And of course, that's just for fun. I mean, if we had a room full of people, you'd be laughing right now, of course. But, just for hypotheticals and messing with it. As you can see here, as I continue on to the right-hand side of these controls, this is what we were talking about as far as the percussion controls. And so if I wanted to, I could click on this percussion, and then I would have access to maybe putting in a tambourine, and then I've got multiple parts that I could choose from. It looks like 3 different parts in this case, right? So if I wanted to, I could click on tambourine now. And there's a tambourine part in there, of course. If I wanted to add shaker, I could do the same thing. Interesting, right? Now, swing and fills, this will allow us to be able to, if we make breakpoints, I'll be able to create fills, and I think that some of you will find this to be really nice because, for example, as I show this here, as you can see, I've got this moment where I may need to add a little bit more, right? So if I just option drag, I'm going to finish out my chord progression. But now in this particular case, I want this to be separated, and I'm going to create two different regions, you see here. Now, the first region is set to this, let's just say loud pattern, but the second region, maybe potentially I could just reverse that back and I could make that a soft pattern. And you can see here, during this cut, I've created a fill. Now, how substantial I want that fill to be, I could just open this up and I could really make that, a fairly aggressive fill if I wanted to, and you see what happens at the end of these phrases. Or I could just make it, just a kind of a softer fill, a couple hits here and there. It's really easy to work with, and of course, as you're messing with it, you're going to find that you can customize it, and as far as I'm concerned, really, get lost with, the fact that you feel like you are hiring a drummer in this case. And so as you can see here now, I've got my first section. I'm working with, this loud drum part. The second section now I'm working with the softer drum part because I've created two different regions. And within those regions, as you can see, I've created a fill. So let me just kind of show you in that position. And then wait for this moment, and you'll also hear another fill. Right? Nice little tom. Pretty cool. Now, if you wanted more fills, just simply make another break and watch the fills show up. See there? Pretty easy to do. Now, as we were talking in the notes as well, clicking down here, we can get to the details, and we can, get to the ghost notes. We can push or pull the feel. Essentially, that's also going to add to the swing element. Hi-hat patterns, if we wanted the hi-hat to be more closed or more open, that could we obviously have access to being able to really fine-tune exactly what that kit's going to sound like. And so, as you can see here now, I've got these three distinct regions, and let's actually just stair-step these. Let's make that first region that I've just created, and let's make that soft. Let's make the second region a little more aggressive, but simple. And then that third region, let's put that dynamically louder and more complex. See how we can kind of build dynamics on that side? I think food for thought, that could be a wonderful way for some of you to work. But, again, there's so many choices and so many ways to work. It's hard to say that there's one right way. So hopefully that will help you on that side. As we continue on then, very simple then, we want to look at what we could do with the drum kit. And so you see where the drum kit and where we've inputted that drum kit. If I go to the drum kit in itself, I get an actual drum kit because in this case, the genre that I picked, rock, alternative, and also songwriter, is going to pick an actual and acoustic kit. And so that drum kit, when we pick it, if I click to the center, you'll see it shows up with an actual kit. If you felt like you wanted to push the kick drum or the snare drum further, you easily could. Just simply click on each individual hit, and you'll be able to get different kicks. And you can really push that because, as you note, each individual drum kick now obviously is a different sample, plus I could take and detune them, I can dampen each individual drum, I can turn them up. Very, very powerful. So if I wanted to, let's say for example, tune the snare, I could do the same thing. Making choices based on obviously the track in itself, but having total control. And with that said, mixing without really truly having to mix, we're actually changing the actual source in itself, which I think is very powerful. So the same thing, if we wanted that snare to be a little bit bassier, we just detune it a touch, right? We could dampen the snare. Very, very powerful. The same goes for the cymbals, hi-hat, all the way down the line. You have access to customize every single sound, as well as if you wanted to change out the actual kit, you could. So here's a Motown kit, for example. And exactly the same programming, only with this particular kit now. Right? Something that we could note here we get this side stick happening, right? Based on our dynamics, I think that's just absolutely wonderful. And some of these kits will get to those dynamics and it'll actually change it, so we get that, less aggressive sound versus the full snare hit, right? All based on how we programmed what we programmed here in our drummer track. Really, really easy. So on top of that, what can we do? Well, let's say, for example, we didn't necessarily want to utilize all of this in terms of MIDI. It's very difficult for many of us actually to see this and to be able to manipulate this. As you can see here, of course, if I double click on the MIDI information, I can see the MIDI information. But if I double click on this, obviously this shows up into this matrix and where I can actually change out the samples. But realistically, it doesn't look like MIDI. So what exactly can I do? Well, if I was to right click or control click, I could actually take and we can convert this to MIDI. Now, one thing that I would suggest to you is to make sure that you've got the groove that you want. Now, as you can see, it's a lot of fun to be able to get those grooves in, and it's really, really easy to do. It sounds like the player's playing it, and in many cases, obviously, that groove in itself is exclusive to these particular players, as you can see here. So if you're happy with it, then, of course, do that. Convert it, and then you can convert the MIDI regions. But, of course, make sure that you're ready for it. Now, of course, one thing that we can do, just to make sure, is we could just take this and couldn't we just copy another instance and then let's just option drag that down. And then maybe in this case, we could convert that instead, right? Either way, there's multiple ways to do the same thing for everything. So that could be wonderful. And as you can see here now, look at all of that programming that we've just created. And that is that actual player. That's Kyle playing that pop rock track using that Motown kit. All set right there. We've got access now, in this case, to each individual sample. Isn't that fun? So, same thing. We had access to our drummer track, and all we did was just simply convert those regions. And I'm just right-clicking in this particular case. Another way that you could do that is you could just drag this up to a MIDI track and then drag it back. It's another way to do it. Hopefully that makes our programming very, very easy. But as you can see here in this particular case, I have the same sound. I'm using the same Motown kit. I've got the same groove. The only difference is now I can get to each individual hit. And let's say, for example, at some moments we may not want the hi-hat or a certain hit here or there or something like that. For whatever reason, you could get to each individual one, and you could not do that before, of course, right? So hopefully that helps you in that case. But again, very quickly, that adaptive drummer, that region has been replaced by the MIDI region, and now basically we've got access to, I think, the heart and soul of what MIDI is all about, right? Now, the Drum Machine Designer Ultra Beat Combo is very capable and a great sounding option. If you're going to use those sounds, here's some good ideas to get the most out of them. Head to your drummer track on the mixer and click the small triangle along the bottom of its channel strip. As you can see here, I've also got it here in this little box, and if I click this, I can have access to every single track that we've just programmed. Isn't that interesting? It reveals the underlying multi-instrument Ultra Beat running the show, or in this case, the drummer running the show, and giving us the full mixer capabilities over each piece in the kit, or Ultra Beat if we decide that's what we want to do. And so let me just kind of show you exactly how this works. And very quickly, I'll just go to Command 2. And as you can see, that little triangle there, I'm able to get to that, simple Motown beat that we created. I just went back to the actual drummer track in itself so that we could get to this in the mult out. And let me just show you how this works. Get to the actual mixer, click on that triangle, and you can see every single track working. Overheads, kicks, snares, everything can be mixed. EQ, compressed, whatever you decide you want to do. Very custom, isn't that nice? And very quickly we've got access to each individual part. Now, it doesn't give us the access to being able to see it in the timeline, but to be able to mix it, I think for many of you, you'll find that ease is very, very quick. Many of us work that way, of course. And don't forget, when it comes down to it, maybe potentially a great way to go would be just simply to drag and drop your information and put it back and see what happens from there, right? Many ways to do the same thing, of course, but let's get back to the last thing that we want to talk about. What happens if you want to, let's say, for example, not necessarily have an acoustic kit, but you want to have a hip hop kit with this, right? Kind of like Ultrabeat, but you want the programmer. It's very easy to do. And so let's do exactly the same thing. Let's just open up Drummer. In this case, let's change the genre to maybe hip hop or electronic. I'll just go to electronic here. What happens now is it gives us access to a drum machine. And if we want to, we can change out the person that's programming it or whatever we want. So I'll use Leah. The drum machine, as I click on it here, you can see gives us access to each individual hit. And if we wanted to, of course, we could change the pitch, envelope, distortion. We could add sub to it, presence, pan it off to one side or the other, simple volume changes. It's very, very powerful. And so as you can see now, as I run this through, now we've got Leah doing her programming within this drum machine. And same thing, if you wanted to add a fill, just come in to your program, into your edit, and what you've programmed, and you'll see here you're going to create a fill now. So as you can see too, this doesn't look a lot like Ultrabeat. Now, most importantly though, if we wanted to, we could still separate out each individual drum. Going back to Command 2, if I wanted, I could see the kick, I could see the snare, I could see everything here, and we could, if we decided to, we could add a bunch of fun stuff. Now, some of you are sitting back going, you know what, that's pretty cool, but I don't like those sounds. I want to use the sounds. Let's say, for example, if you saw the Ultrabeat lecture, you want to use the 808. How and can I put those sounds into this particular matrix? Well, it's really very simple. In fact, I think that's maybe more simple than Ultrabeat. All I need to do is just simply drag and drop. So in that particular kick pattern, now that you've got what you got, I want to go back and I want to look at those Ultrabeat samples that we created. So where are those guys at? Let's just open this up real quick. In our materials, you can see here I've got my 808 sample. Let's open up that sample, and I've got my bass drum in this particular case. Now let's get that bass drum. And I'm going to just drag and drop it here in the kick area. Grab it. And you'll notice here it just populates. Now let's do the same thing. I don't like that snare. So let's take that snare drum and let's use this particular snare drum, for example. Okay, Let's just drag and drop that. Now, maybe potentially the hi-hat. And, okay, and now let me just change out that clap real quick. Perfect. Much better. Let's drag and drop that. Okay, let's see what we got. Pretty fun. Now, of course, we could go over and over and over that, but as you can see, just changing out 3 sounds very quickly really makes that thing pop. And of course, I'm actually very simply dragging and dropping, and I think that for many of us, that's about as easy as it gets. And realistically, as far as the programming is concerned, I'm utilizing a lot of what's happening here with Leah, and not changing too much, of course. And how could I change this? Well, just going back to it and what we'd had, let's just say we're happy with this. Highlight it. Create another MIDI track, for example, very quickly. Drag and drop it off of that track. Move it back. And let's say, for example, if you wanted to keep that one there, just for hypotheticals, you certainly could. But as you can see here, it's really that fast. Or, of course, as you saw, we could just simply control click and we could convert that as well. It's really that easy. So hopefully that helps. And as you can see now, you still have access to your mults out. But most importantly in this case, if you wanted to, you could change her programming any way that you want to. You don't need to utilize that in that way that it was in that drummer track side. But I think that you'll find that utilizing the drummer track is very fun. For many of us, it helps us get into the creative mode of creating our chord changes, being able to come up with certain arpeggiation patterns, bass lines, things like that. I don't know. I personally don't think that it's considered cheating if I hire a drummer. I've been hiring drummers as far as for my bands, my personal bands, since the 80s and 90s, of course. So I don't see that as a bad thing. So in this case, looking at the drummer track as being able to hire somebody into your projects might be a great way to go for many of you. And as you can see here, it does not have to be just acoustic. It could be electronic, as I've picked here. It could be hip hop. It could be percussion based. It could be anything that you want. Percussion based, of course, a lot of fun. Maybe potentially that might be where you're going. So imagine, if you're happy with that, and if you wanted to stair step that, of course you could do it, right? I'm just going to take this information then, and let's just build it. And now we'll have some dynamics based on our percussion that we've just created, right? And on and on and on and on. Creating a breakdown, a drop. The sky's the limit, and there are no rules. I hope that helps. I hope you love the drummer track as much as I do, and that spells it out for you. Let me know if you need anything. Let us know if you have any questions. Take care, everybody.